I've been trying to solve this question since Tera Types were officially revealed. What is the best Tera Type in Pokemon Scarlet and Violet? Now, on the surface, this feels like it should be a very easy question to answer because Pokemon's been around for so long, it's been played by so many people, competitive understanding is pretty good, so we just go, the best type is the best Tera Type, right? Well, dual typings have made the best type discussion kind of murky. Like, we know grass and ice are some of the worst and fairies up there, but we really don't have anything definitive as to what the best type in Pokemon is, even after 25 years of Pokemon being out. So that's what this video is going to break down, all the types, all the Tera interactions, and fun stuff like that. So if you enjoy the video, or if it helps out in any way, don't forget to leave a like, share it with your friends, and comment your thoughts down below. But we do need to have a quick breakdown of Tera types. So Tera Type just adds an offensive typing to your Pokemon based on that Pokemon's Tera Type. So Garchomp goes from Dragon and Ground to Dragon, Ground, and Water Stab, all of these moves dealing 50% more damage. Now if you have a typing of an original type, then you go to 2x damage. So a Ground Tera Garchomp gets double the damage on its Ground type moves for the same type attack boosted move, and then it retains the original stab. Defensively, you become that monotype. If you go ground, you are a defensive ground type. Water, you're a defensive water type. So you can use this to change a Pokemon's weaknesses and resistances, as well as pick up some immunities. So maybe in discussion, just the best defensive typing is going to work out. However, you do want consideration for good offensive typings, that way you can increase your coverage, and because of Tera Blast, you can give Pokemon type moves that they would not otherwise have. It's a stronger hidden power that also gets same type attack boost. It's nuts. And again, even though Pokemon has been around for so long, we could probably still get some more development on optimal type coverage, but there are some go-tos. We have Ghost Fighting. Until Hisui and Zoroark existed, this just hits everything neutral, so you're not going to be resisted. But it's not only about having a type matchup that covers everything, the meta comes into play. So in the past, or like depending on the meta, Bolt Beam is a classic. You know, it's walled out by a few things, but not really super meta except for the Magnezone, but you do want to be hitting Dragon-type Pokemon with that Ice, so backing it up with a Thunderbolt is really nice. And then just kind of looking for the most super effective hits possible and rounding out your coverage in interesting ways. And then there's a few intangibles like Water plus Freeze Dry. So Freeze Dry makes it to where you actually have no Pokemon resisting you, and then you pick up an insane amount of super effective hits. The list goes on, the coverage gets crazy, and in the case of Pokemon DB, we don't have it updated to Generation 9 yet, so there's still some more development that could go on for optimal type combos and getting the most super effective hits. But this does apply to your offensive Tera Type. But a type coverage checker doesn't really just answer what the best type to slap on any Pokemon is to increase your coverage, so we still need to look into what the best type actually is. So let's start off with the normal type. What does normal give us? Consistency, that we have one weakness and one immunity, but no resistances. Now I might be thinking, boring, this is just Pokemon type coverage, everyone knows that. But you really need to think about it critically. You really need to have Tera in mind because you have original stab on your core Pokemon, so you're not just a normal type. You're a normal type that can also throw out super effective hits or crazy coverage stab moves with really powerful offensive typings, but as a ghost type Pokemon, now you don't have to worry about that Shadow Ball. You can buy yourself a free turn, and that's one way of looking at Tera value. If you terrestrialize your Pokemon and you get a free turn out of it, that could be game changing, that could be game winning. So this is already far more complex than just standard Pokemon type discussion, and we have to answer a really tricky question before we can even begin. What is better, a defensive Tera Type or an offensive Tera Type? Now, offensive Tera Types give us access to crazy things we couldn't even imagine before in Pokemon with like triple stab and crazy stuff like that, but Pokemon do just fine hurting other Pokemon, so I think you more want it for the defensive aspects, and the defensive aspects also get pretty crazy. Removing 4 times weaknesses, buying yourself a turn on not even an immunity, but even a resisted hit, or turning a super effective hit neutral, and then buying an extra turn of durability. And then that goes into even deeper questions that are even harder to answer. What is the best type for a specific attribute? What is the best special defense type, just monotype in Pokemon? What's the best defensive type in Pokemon? So if I want a full physical tank, what should I terrestrialize it into? And if I want a full special tank, what should I terrestrialize it into? It gets kind of crazy, but it really seems like the argument is defense-based. So Ghost, it's fine, but you really want to pick up resistance. You really want to round out your team. Okay, so we're 5 minutes into the video and we've barely covered a single type. This is why it's been such a struggle over the last couple of months to figure out what is going on with Tera types, and it only gets more complicated with Fire because then we learn typings have specific passive attributes. Fire-type Pokemon are immune to burns. That's really good for physical Pokemon, and then there's other interactions just scattered about in the game that if Sunny Day is active, or you're playing a Sun team, or if you're trying to counter the opponent's photosynthesis, Fire-type moves get 50% power in Harsh Sunlight. Becoming Stab into that just gives you more damage on top of crazy damage, and then this is where things get weird as well, because we are pretty weak defensively, but also pretty strong. Fairy argued to be one of, if not the best typing in the game, and because of that, we have a lot of presence with Steel. You resist both on Fire. That's really good. Ice, a lot of people have Ice for the pesky dragon Pokemon, and Grass is a good way of teching against Mono Water, but then Earthquake weakness. You really don't want the Earthquake weakness. Rock isn't too much of a problem, but then Water can get pretty problematic. So it kind of goes into this weird thing where, on paper, it looks good to set up, but at the same time, terrestrialization is your gimmick. This is a Mega Evolution level of power. This is what you do instead of Dynamaxing your Pokemon. Do you just randomly turn something Fire? According to the meta, according to the battles, not really. You don't get enough crazy benefit out of it. So that means there has to be some really crazy typings that are getting abused with terrestrialization that we will be covering. Again, like, comment, subscribe, watch the whole video. Helps with YouTube audience retention. And then engage with the video so we get viewer satisfaction and all of that other fun YouTube stuff. But then we go into Water. And Water just kind of shows, okay, now we can see what's going on here. Grass, Electric. Not the worst weaknesses. Water argued to be the best dependable, reliable type. You just throw a water Pokemon out there and it's gonna be okay. You also have good resistances on Steel, Fire, Water, and Ice. Talked about Steel being strong because Fairy is strong. Ice, Water, Fire, yeah, all that's good stuff. If you slap Water onto a Pokemon, it's going to be fine. Now that Pokemon won't be fine if you slap Grass onto it. That's a lot of weaknesses, and it's a joke in the Pokemon community that Grass just dooms what would be good Pokemon. Now, there are some type combinations that make the Grass more playable, and there's just very abusive Pokemon like a Moongus in the meta, but that goes into like movesets and abilities and other stuff. But a mono Grass type Pokemon is not having a good time. Way too many weaknesses, even though you got good resistances. You resist the Earthquake. You resist the reliable water Pokemon. Grass, Electric, you cover all that, but it's too many weaknesses at the end of the day. You can't really be using your Tera on a mono Grass type Pokemon, even though you have the immunity to Powder and Spore moves. But you know what else has that? Dual type Grass Pokemon that are strong. And then we get into an S tier defensive Tera type with Electric. One weakness in the ground. You can just give any Levitate Pokemon mono Electric, and then it's weak to nothing. It's that simple. And you also have decent resists, like Flying. That's not the most common, but there's that Steel again, and resisting Electric can also be pretty nice. So a big talking point before Pokemon Scarlet and Violet came out was that Electric is going to be the most common Tera type. And then it wasn't. Still very strong, still builds into some crazy strategies. We have Pokemon like the Earthworm that has one of the most ludicrous abilities ever introduced in Pokemon. It's Water Absorb, but for ground. So you just heal off of an Earthquake on a Steel-type Pokemon base, or you turn it into a Tera Electric, have no weaknesses, and actually heal off of the Earthquake. But Tera Electric isn't the most common. So how do you beat that? How do you get more crazy than Tera Electric? Let's keep on going. Except it's not going to be fighting. Fighting kind of falling into a trapping of some of the other typings where you just get too many weaknesses that outweigh the resistances you get. You resist Rock, Bug, and Dark. What are you going to do with that when Fairy just destroys you? And then that Stray, Flying, or Psychic type Pokemon makes your life way too difficult. However, defensively, the interactions go beyond just defensive stats and typing, and now into offense because of power creep that was introduced in Generation 8 with the move Body Press. You have a tank Pokemon that goes into Body Press to then get 50% more damage while using its defense stat for damage. Problem with fighting offensively, though, is that it's immune by Ghost-type Pokemon. But if your opponent doesn't have any Ghosts, and you go into the fighting Body Press Tera Type, that could actually just completely sweep a team off of absurd damage. But the weaknesses are still kind of spooky. It's going to be very specific and niche tech. After that, we have Flying. So you look at Flying, after we just talked about fighting, after we just talked about some of the other types, and even considering monotyping, Flying doesn't hit a lot, and it doesn't really seem that great because you have so many weaknesses. Like, I don't want to eat that Thunderbolt. I don't want to eat the Ice Beam. Tyranitar showing up ruins my day. Yet in the backwards meta of Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, Flying is looking to be one of the best Tera types because that ground immunity is so strong. And it's not for the reason you think. It's not, oh, Scarf Chomp Earthquake, I'm just going to go Tera Flying and then immune the turn and actually get 2 turns because now the Choice Scarf Earthquake Pokemon needs to switch out. Nope, it's not that. The reality is we are in a fissure meta. Everything has fissure. Dondozo has fissure. Garganasalt has fissure. Hippo has fissure. So if you want to keep your Pokemon safe, you go Flying Tera. Now, your tank Pokemon are now whatever Pokemon you're trying to set up on doesn't get cheesed out by the fissure. If you don't believe me, here's your proof. Here's how ugly the Pokemon Scarlet and Violet meta has gotten, and here's the situation you will find yourself in. Or if you just randomly throw out Garganasalt, any Pokemon at any time can go Flying just to make sure you can't hit it. Also, we talked about Body Press. Body Press, very scary on a lot of Pokemon. Garganasalt, but also Corviknight. Corviknight starts going Iron Defense. That Body Press is now very scary, but Flying resists it. So you think, okay, what am I going to do with a fighting resist? A bug resist? Like, these aren't scary offensive typings. Like, okay, I guess absorbing close combat now and then is pretty good, but it's only now and then. However, the tanks are so prevalent, the Body Press is so prevalent, ground offense is so prevalent that, yeah, Flying Tera actually taking over as one of the best Tera types. If it's the best Tera type, we still need to find out. And if it wasn't for fissure meta, if it wasn't for bulky Body Press being so common, this would probably be a very mediocre, if not bad, Tera type. Like, cool, you get a very predictable ground immunity, but that's it. You've burned your big power gimmick for just that, and now your ace Pokemon is stuck without a great offensive typing and with a pretty vulnerable defensive typing. Then we can take a look at Poison. And there's ground again, but everything else is looking pretty good. That's a lot of resistances, and we have some good resistances like the Fairy. So even comparing it to Fire, we just have an extra weakness with like Rock or Water, and Psychic isn't the worst to have, so pretty comparable with one less weakness on the Poison, and we also have Toxic Immunity. That's kind of lost some power because Toxic just isn't a free TM on every Pokemon anymore, and it also makes it to where if you go Tera Toxic on a Pokemon that doesn't have Toxic, you're not benefiting from Poison Pokemon bypassing accuracy check when using Toxic. That was a mouthful of nonsense words that don't even matter anymore, but it just kind of goes more into the theory of mono Pokemon typings. But like this, it's okay. It seems strong, but actually doesn't. There might be some situations on some Pokemon where this could work, but you're not really seeing a lot of toxic stalling anymore, and then that ground pressure is still strong. Steel is going to be a similar story that, again, we have like one extra weakness, we get so many extra resistances. However, Steel type Pokemon that already exist in the game are just good at being Steel type Pokemon. Either their movesets, their natural durability, the way they just kind of like fit in for their specific niche. It's like they were designed to be reliable Steel-type Pokemon. Now, we do have some pretty spooky weaknesses right here, but these can be accounted for, and we also just pick up the poison immunity, so we can't be toxic. I know there's going to be some smartasses that say corrosion or whatever, but in general, we don't have to worry about poison-type Pokemon, so we pick up an immunity on top of the poison, and we're just a better defensive typing. Now, we can't stay in on everything because a less bulky Pokemon doesn't want these super effective hits. That's why you just plan around it. You team build around your Tera Steel Pokemon, and you're going to be very rewarded, and you're also just picking up a ton of resistances to pad out the rest of your team. So Tera Steel is very splashable, but needs a little bit of consideration. Like, just have a bulky water-type Pokemon. It absorbs the fire, and it doesn't care about a neutral earthquake or fighting-type move. And ground fighting, very predictable as well, because those are mostly going to be physical moves. So you have a physical water tank with a Tera Steel Pokemon, and you're effectively untouchable on just 2 Pokemon. Now, does a Pokemon want to become a ground-type Tera? Maybe. But like we kind of talked about, that the electric terrestrialization didn't really take off. Now, if more Pokemon were becoming mono-electric and you need to respond to them, there we go. But again, something Tera Electric is going to cheese into no weaknesses. You're immune to electric on the ground typing, but you're not seeing like an outrageous amount of offensive electric pressure in the meta. And it's also not just the meta, it's the restricted decks or DLC decks, whatever's happening in the regional decks at the time, depending on like where this discussion goes. And then everything else is not good. Water, grass, ice, you're going to see those enough to have a pretty bad time, and you pick up no value on the resist right here. So you really don't want to go into this typing unless you have something pretty wild, like a double Dragon Danced Salamence that wants to go dual wing beat, Dragon type move, Earthquake, all stab, just mow down every Pokemon. But then you're still going to be like weak to ice, 2x with 4x. Salamence doesn't want to eat any of those. So yeah, it's one of those like weird things where don't want to go Tera Ground in pretty much every situation. Then we have the rock typing, which looks very similar to grass types. The problem is, rock type Pokemon are designed to be sturdy and attempt to survive having so many weaknesses, but they barely do that. So if you put this on a Pokemon that wasn't designed for it, they're screwed, and you don't pick up enough resistances for it to matter. So yeah, rock discussion, very easy, 0 value, don't do it. Bug. So Bug is weird because you look at the Pokemon that get Bug, and now it's kind of the opposite thing as Rock. These Pokemon weren't designed to be durable, but what does a durable mono Bug Pokemon look like? Actually not the spookiest weaknesses. Flying, Rock, Fire. You know, it's like mostly every rock hit you're going to see is Rock Slide, low base power, and then there's no Tera Rock stab threat. And it's also not going to be a lot of same type attack boosting. Fire, kind of common, but since Ferrothorn doesn't exist and we don't have like a lot of need to shut down 4x fire weak Pokemon, alright, that's going to be a thing. And yeah, flying, people are going Tera Flying for the defensive, not for the offensive, and flying coverage isn't good anyway. What are they going to do? Use Fly? That's just giving you a free turn. So actually, Mono Bug doesn't give you that much resistant defenses, but also doesn't give you a lot of weakness as well. So it's kind of in the same boat as normal, but gives you different offensive pressure. Like, I think there is a moderate usage case for a Pokemon that is weak to ground to actually just pack in the Bug Tera type, resist it, and then do weird stuff with the rest of the package. Now, offensively, it looks terrible, but it actually makes the discussion a lot more interesting because you bring Grass, dark and psychic weaknesses, which aren't really super common things to throw at your opponent. And even though we have a ton of resistances, that's usually only bad because there's a lot of grass bug Pokemon out there, so they don't really pick up a lot of these. So if you take a Pokemon that has a good dual type, I'm not saying Garchomp specifically, I'm just kind of like using this example, like if you take that and you pivot it bug, it could actually work. And that's where this whole discussion about Pokemon gets so weird. It's been around for a quarter century and we still don't have like solid content or solid discussions and posts about what the best dual type Pokemon is, because before terrestrialization, it was locked to the Pokemon. Even if somehow there was an objective argument for the best dual type in Pokemon, which can't really exist, but if somehow that existed, it would just be restricted to the species of Pokemon. If it has bad stats and moveset or ability, you effectively don't have the best dual typing because the Pokemon isn't good. So I'm actually going to put Bug in the top 5. Ice. No, only on offensive sweeping Pokemon that get one shot anyway, like the Weavile, to get that extra 30% damage from the offensive Tera type. But do you really want to all in that hard? I mean, like, Chien-Pao is the new Weavile, so I guess Ice Chien-Pao for the extra damage is kind of it, but for 99% of Pokemon, no. Ghost. Ghost is interesting because 2 immunities, but not the craziest. Normal isn't hitting anything super effective, literally, and fighting, again, it's not like the craziest thing you need to do, but a rock-type Pokemon going Ghost and like absorbing the fighting, that's pretty good. So if you have that weakness, and then you go Ghost and do something with the Ghost, that's alright. And then, not the worst weaknesses, Dark-type, you see a good amount of Dark-type, and it's also both physical and special, so Dark is something that's specifically hard to tank against if you're weak to it. Ghost, it's going to be pretty much special, but yeah, it's decent. However, there's also some other interactions, because you can either Tera off a Ghost-type Pokemon to use Curse and then not curse yourself, or you Tera into Ghost-type Pokemon on a filthy tank or something to curse. Now, this is very specific to Garganasalt as a Pokemon, because its ability makes it take half damage from Ghost-type moves. So you don't have a Ghost weakness here, and then you can, like, extra Giga Wall Break by cursing the opponent and Purifying Salt them, and then they're taking a lot of damage. Defensively, though, it's kind of weird because your resistances and immunities aren't super important, and Dark is a very spooky typing to get hit super with. After that, we have Dragon. So Dragon has some interesting cases. I feel like Dragon is the best typing defensively against special attackers. And in the months leading up to Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, after Tera was revealed, I was trying to pitch this. I was talking to people. I'm like, hey, what is the best Tera type or the best monotype against physical Pokemon? No one had an answer. Pokemon's been around for a quarter century. What about special? No one had an answer. I'm the one doing all this research and theory and stuff by myself when it could have and should have been established beforehand. Tera types make everything so weird, but fire, commonly going to be special. Water, commonly going to be special. Grass, electric, pretty much only special. Like, I guess Seed Bomb and Breloom messes up with grass, but you see the basic elemental types generally skew special. You go Dragon, and now you can just turn that into some kind of heavy resistance and a ground-type Pokemon. I do this on my Hippo. Hippowdon goes from ground-type being weak to water and grass, and then transitioning to having those as resistances. That's effectively an immunity on a tank Pokemon. It buys you a turn and you can win the game. Problem is, Ice, also special. Fairy, mostly special. Gets some mix with that play rough. And then Dragon, also mixed, but Draco Meteor, common and special. So you kind of like pick up common special resistances, but then you can transfer into common special weaknesses. However, it means like everything here is pretty much special based, so you know what to apply it for. And the Dragon typing is very interesting because Fairy existed to bring Dragon and Dark-type Pokemon in line because Dragon was kind of seen as the best typing in the game, but mostly because it was only reserved for the most powerful of Pokemon. And we can also see some wild characteristics. Many Dragon Pokemon are pseudo-legendary or legendary Pokemon. Because of this, Dragon Pokemon have the highest average hit points and base stat total of all Pokemon. And then, like, yeah, you look at that fully evolved, Okay, Dragon is just strong, but Dragon is built for the strong Pokemon as a typing. But if you take a specially defensive Pokemon that's initially weak to one of these things and then give it Dragon Tera, it's not going to complain. So it's surprisingly just a solid Tera to throw onto something. After that, we have Dark. We just talked about how Dark is good. Prankster immunity, it's a thing. It exists. It might matter in very niche setup situations, but doesn't really happen too often, except in doubles. Doubles is going to be more common, so when Prankster is common, Dark gets stronger. Also, offensively, Dark is really good because you can go Dark Tera on a Dark Pokemon with Sucker Punch, crazy priority damage, or you can just kind of give Dark to a Pokemon that has high stats and Sucker Punch, but no base Dark type, crazy priority damage, and then it has like the anti-resist. So Ghost is going to be weak to Ghost and Dark. That Pokemon becomes a Dark type Pokemon, those become resistances, and then like you flip around your weaknesses and resistances and immunities and stuff, and pick up the Psychic immunity. Maybe you are a Fighting type Pokemon, maybe you are a Poison type Pokemon. You go Dark, and you only really have to worry about Fairy. And speaking of Fairy, we have the last Tera type, which does pretty well. Poison and Steel weaknesses, not the craziest things, and really only exist because Fairy type Pokemon exist. Fairies being so strong makes Poison and Steel more common and relevant, and it's mostly just going to be the Steel over Poison. So that's the only thing you have to worry about, and that's very easy to absorb with a bulky water type Pokemon. So you make one of your ace Pokemon a Fairy Tera type, and it's very easy to cover for. Dragon immunity, if the opponent's trying to go for like their big dunk after Dragon dances into the Outrage, or they've got like specs into Draco Meteor, you say no and you buy yourself 2 turns. Resistances aren't that much, but you also don't have to worry about anything when you become a Fairy, so the resistances aren't that needed. However, Dark, it's relevant. So turning Dark into a resistance is going to have that power, kind of offsetting the Steel, and then everything else is just kind of a benefit. Another weird thing about Fairies is that, once again, the stats are kind of built for the type. Pokemon of this type have the highest average special defense of all types. We also see high average special attack stats. So Fairy type Pokemon are going to be more special skewed, but now you can just kind of Fairy skew any other Pokemon and it's going to be pretty good. So Fairy is seen as one of, if not the best types for the Pokemon that it's specifically designed for, and then you can just give Fairy to more powerful Pokemon with the offensive power of Fairy to break down Dark, Dragon, and Fighting Pokemon. And because of this specific type design, everything that resists Fairy is weak to ground. So before Terastallization, there really wasn't like a crazy offensive Fairy ground pressure. I mean, I guess you could see like Earth Power, but is there anything that gets Moonblast Earth Power? Deontay, Carbink, and Lunatone. Wow, Lunatone just had like some of the best coverage, but no one ever picked up on it. Alright, what about Earth Power Dazzling Gleam? Now we get into some interesting stuff, but still doesn't show any Fairy type Pokemon that just had this before. So now you can either give a Fairy Tera Ground, so we did talk about that, like only in very specific and extreme offensive scenarios can you get away with this. So Fairy going into ground for just pure offense, but it seems like flipping that around and going a ground and even a dual type ground type Pokemon going into Fairy. I haven't seen the Fairy Garchomp yet. That actually sounds like pretty nasty when you think about it. And then just having like crazy coverage off of that. So there we go, guys. That is the long video about the best Tera types and their interactions and how they work. And it's one of those things where it's a study on Pokemon types that has never really existed and should have existed in all the time Pokemon has been around. And now it's even more complicated and stuff. And we still don't have anything conclusive because it's all like meta dependent and weird in that way. So flying, very common because of specific stuff going on. Electric in theory is good but doesn't exist. And then some other typings are like, yeah, you can just do that. So I think the biggest thing about Tera types, and even though this isn't the conclusion people want, it's the reality of the situation after talking about it for a very long time. It's mostly Pokemon specific. You can like do a catch-all on some kind of tank Pokemon, but you just want to give the Pokemon what it wants. And that's why I do moveset guides. So subscribe, check out that playlist. Also, watch my battles, because it's me with different Pokemon going up against opponents with different Pokemon, and then kind of figuring out how everything combines into competitive, which is why this channel is the best competitive Pokemon channel on YouTube, which is also why you need to like, comment, subscribe, check out all that content, and really get into it. But that's kind of like the summary here. You can get some takeaways. You can understand some of these interactions with how Tera types work. But because we have over 1,000 creatures with a lot of crazy interactions, passives, specific matchups, niche things, and a metagame that makes some things more common than others, Tera's just too diverse. You can't really say a Tera is the best, and even in like sub-discussions about the best archetype defending Tera, it's still a little murky. So there we go, guys. Hope y'all enjoyed the best Tera video on YouTube. Hope y'all have a nice day. Thank you very much for watching.